Jean
Oh,
Wu
no, go
of
ahead.
Custom Solar Power.
Yeah.
Jean became interested in doing something about climate change when her granddaughter was born. She realized that in 25 years, we would be in big trouble if we did not do something about climate change. That was 10 years ago. In the meantime, she started Custom Power Solar in 2012 to put in solar plus battery systems plus EV chargers, reducing the greenhouse gases coming from the use of energy from the grid, and reducing greenhouse gases coming from the tailpipe of a car. It's good thinking there. Now we are in a different era, and we can electrify our homes and buildings, as well as adding distributed energy and battery storage. We need to make the switch as quickly as possible and preserve the beautiful world we have for our children and grandchildren. Jean Wu, woo woo! Yeah, Jean, take
I'm
it
I'm
away.
I'm really excited to do this also because, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like a huge hero of mine. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody has done as much for women or for people in general as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was tireless and to the very end. Anyway, so this is a picture of one of our installations. This is something that we think is very interesting and useful. It is a ballasted system on a somewhat flat roof. So it's about 5-degree angle. And what we're doing is using east-west directions. So on the east side, you get the sun in the morning. On the west side, you get the sun in the afternoon. And you can get a good 10 to 20% more power out of a system that's designed this way. And it's entirely ballasted, so there are no holes in your roof. So one of the things we think is really important is that we do need to get to 100% renewables. We cannot do it without storage. So solar and storage or wind and storage are two of the options available now. And then what do we get when you start putting in solar on your roof and a battery system? You can use arbitrage, which is a way of using the sun to put power into your battery during the day and then use the power that you've already gained to offset your load in the evening. In time of use systems like we have in PG&E territory, it's all time of use, then you're saving money because you're using your own power that you've saved to offset the power you would otherwise purchased from the local utility. You also can, if you have an all-electric home, reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by avoiding the use of natural gas. You reduce your utility bill, and you hedge against future increases in utility rates. And in areas that have net energy metering, in our case 2.0, or in a community CCA area, you end up with payment. So if you actually use less energy than the power you produce in a year in PG&E territory, you can be paid for the power you produce and send to the grid. It's actually monitored monthly by the CCAs. So there's kind of a double bill that you get, and a lot of people get confused by it. But if you think of it as two separate systems and their true up in a CCA is monthly, then PG&E is yearly, then you actually notice you get paid twice. You can use solar power. It charges an electric vehicle very nicely. And there is no additional insurance cost by adding the solar, and it adds to your home's appraised value when you sell it. I just had to add some pictures because Sean said add pictures. So what does it do? So the solar, it can be on your roof. It can be, in some cases, on the garage or even on the ground. The batteries can be placed in non-living spaces indoors, in the garage, or outside. And I have a picture down here on the right, which shows the batteries which can be placed outside. The inverter, which is what it does, inverts, changes the DC power from the sun, turns it into AC power. This can be a single inverter, that's called a string inverter, or attached to the panels, which frequently come that way, and those are micro inverters. You can use a sub-panel for critical loads. That's usually placed near the main panel. And AC coupled systems are a little more complicated than DC coupled systems. So AC coupled systems will have two inverters. The battery has an inverter that powers it with DC power. DC to DC systems will have only one inverter. So why add battery? 1, you reduce your greenhouse gases. 2, you get energy security, and you reduce your utility bill. In the future, there's also a couple of other possibilities that look like they are going to be coming of age sometime in the next few years. One is With the EV2 rate in PG&E territory, it's called the storage rate, you can have storage without an EV and get the benefits of a highly leveraged rate for the periods that are high demand and a very low rate for the periods that are low demand, so that you can actually charge your car in those periods. And other utilities have similar rates. Otherwise, there's something called virtual power plants. This is something that some of the companies have started to do, where they can internet activate and use these battery systems to respond to grid demands and then get paid for being able to power the grid when the grid is having issues, and not actually take a lot of power out of each individual battery, but using the virtual power from the plants that they have in a neighborhood or a community. This has been shown to be extremely effective in Germany, and Sonnen, for instance, has been doing this for many years. You also get islanding, so if the grid goes down, either from a PSPS event or it just goes down, like we had a wind event recently and lots of people lost power, then the battery inverter will automatically convert itself using an automatic transfer switch, island your home, and you won't even know what happened. Also, if you have an EV, there is a potential that the EV will be able to support homes if the grid goes down. This is called V2G or V2H. Nissan Leaf has done this before. They did it in Fukushima. Mitsubishi Outlander is doing it in Europe, and the Audi e-tron is apparently also capable of doing this. Some of the rates that we think you need to look at if you're going to go with storage and EV is the EV2 rate. As you can see, the peak rate in the summer is about 48 cents a kilowatt hour. Whereas if you're on the old or more frequently used E time of use C rate, that's 41 cents a kilowatt hour. The off-peak rate is not that different, 36 to 34 cents. But if you look at the off-peak rate here on the summer rate, it's 16 cents. It used to be 12 for the EV2 rate and 8 cents for the baseline rate. In the winter, you end up with a very different situation where the peak is, while it's higher, and all of these rates look higher than the E time of use rate. If you remember that you're going to offset all, if not all, most of your summer peak rate, you're just not going to be paying the 48 cents a kilowatt hour. So that is one of the really key reasons to have a battery storage system. It saves money. And this is an example of how much money you can save. So in the second column, you can see that with a smaller system, we install anything from 4 kilowatt PV, 10 kilowatt hours of battery to more like 8 kilowatt PV and 20 kilowatt hours of battery. You can save between $1,500 to $2,500 with solar only. You get a much better bang for your buck with solar plus storage, because on the 8 kilowatt PV, 20 kilowatt hour battery system, on the solar plus storage column here in the central area, you actually get about 150% more. So 50% more, right? 48% more just by having that battery available. You save money every single year. Why is this important? Because you're going to save the money for years and years, and it may take you 5 to 7 years to pay off your system. So after that, this is just money in your pocket. This is a simple picture. So believe it or not, what this means is this is the sun here, producing power with your solar PV panels. This is your power consumption. In other words, it goes up when you get home from work or you start making dinner or whatever people are doing in the afternoon, and it goes up and up until you go to bed. That's consumption. And then the net consumption between the solar and the net load is this typical, as known as the duck curve. On a large scale, this becomes a big issue for the utilities. When you add the battery, this gets a little more complicated. The battery is this green thing here. And as you can see, it fills up well before the peak period begins. And then you can start powering off the battery during the peak. How does this change your use? So if you look at usage, the purple line, so the usage actually is very low when the battery is peaking because you've got the solar going to work, And then as the battery starts to discharge, your usage comes down as well. So the grid flow is this yellow line, and you can see how little you're using, and this is how much money you're making, because that's the power your solar is putting back into the grid. And this is mid-June. This is during the peak of summer. What does this mean about greenhouse gases? Actually, if you have the solar and the battery, the red line, you're actually really, 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 really decreasing your greenhouse gases. So that is the most effective way to decrease greenhouse gases in your typical home. Now, how do you know how much you need? First, you look on your PG&E bill. What is your energy use for the year? And then you need to look at the ways that you can reduce your total energy use. So LEDs rather than CFLs or incandescents, turn off the lights or turn off appliances you don't need during the day, for instance. Get energy efficient appliances. We've heard a lot about that. Get heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, and also timing systems so you know when you want those on and when you don't want those on. And then consider, of course, duct sealing insulation. And then you have things that you identify as essential. So your computer, your phone, your charging, some lights, maybe the internet, and then you can go with a smaller system because you're only identifying those essential things to keep running. So how to determine how much power you need. Take that total kilowatt hours of energy and divide it by 1500. That's the kilowatts of solar that you need, divided by the watts per panel, typically 250, 300, sometimes even 400. That equals the number of solar panels you need. Adjust for shading, adjust for the type of inverter you have, maybe other inefficiencies, long wire runs, and smaller strings are better for shading issues. And then why battery storage? So one, you can provide backup power when the grid goes down, whether it's a brownout or a PSP event. It reduces your utility bill. You need at least 2 hours and probably close to 4 hours of battery storage. And you figure that out by taking your kilowatts of solar PV times 2 or 4, and that's how many kilowatt hours of storage you need. If you have a critical load panel, then you can install that to reduce the number of circuits running off the battery when the grid goes down. And you don't need to get a gas-powered generator. If we're really serious about getting rid of greenhouse gases, getting a gas-powered generator is the wrong direction to go. You increase air pollution, you increase noise pollution, you make greenhouse gases, and then you've got to be continually buying more diesel or propane. They need a lot of maintenance. So, things to know about batteries. The most common systems are called NCA, NMC, and those are Tesla and LG Chem. Some newer systems are the lithium iron phosphate. This is what we use. It's things like Simplify, Fortress, Discover, Energy Port. There are others. Advantages: longer lasting than lead acid batteries, little to no maintenance. Lead acid batteries contain lead. Lead is a toxin. And some lithium batteries need cooling but not ventilation. Lead acid batteries will off-gas hydrogen and require good ventilation. What does it look like? So this box on the bottom on your left is a typical battery. This would be the size of a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery. This is the load center. This is the charge controller. This is your inverter, and here's your main. And if you're adding, this is a particular type of EV charger, but you can add an EV charger at the same time, even if you don't have an EV, just in case you want to do one later. It's much cheaper to do it then than to do it later. So solar is a long-term investment. So what you want to think about is, if you're going to have it on the roof for 15, 20, 30, 35 years, how old is your roof? If it's older, consider getting inspection, replacing it before adding solar, and you get a federal tax incentive, which was recently renewed. So it was due to go out on December 31st of 2020, but now it's actually going to stay 26% to 2023. That portion of your roof that you use for the solar can be used to calculate your federal tax incentive. The solar panels also will make your roof last longer because it shades your roof. If you have a white or light colored roof, you can use the high efficiency bifacial panels and again increase your energy output by between 10 and 20%. Solar power is an asset. You self-generate, use it on site. What you put back in the grid creates credits or cash back to you. And if you get the batteries incentivized with a rebate called the SGIP, Self-Generation Incentive Program, in some areas you can get a pretty decent rebate. But that has gone down quite a bit. So that information is at the end, and I'm not going to go over it unless someone has a specific project or question. So things you need to think about. Are you going to add things that are going to increase your load? Heat pump water heaters, electric vehicles, heat pumps, induction stove, cooktop, electric dryer, freezer, or a hot tub. That's been very popular, actually, hot tubs. Then you need to add that in to provide adequate solar and storage at the beginning so you don't have to go back through this process again. More flowers. Financing can be an issue. So a lot of people use the home equity line of credit, or in some cases, you can get a solar loan from your bank or credit union. There are also the PACE programs, which have low or zero upfront cost, but they actually have a somewhat higher interest rate than a HELOC. The tax credit and the rebates will go to the homeowner, and because it's a property tax-based system, solar system cost goes with the home when you sell it. The lease programs have pros because they're lower upfront cost. The cons are they may affect your ability to sell the home during the lease period, and the lease period can be 20 years and can come with an additional annual adder. Also, you, the homeowner, do not get tax credits or rebates with the lease program. So advantages. Well, if you're not on a lease program, once your investment cost is covered, your energy cost is much lower because you're not paying that. There are no problems with lease negotiation when selling your house. You get all the tax credits and incentives, and as I said, it increases your home's value. Not only that, you can feel good because you're contributing to fighting climate change, especially if you don't add a generator, and you have the benefits of energy security if the grid goes out. Disadvantages include the upfront cost, which is fairly high. It may be a few years before you recoup your investment, and you are still responsible for maintenance and repairs, although your installer should have a contract with you regarding maintenance and repairs. The manufacturers do provide warranties. The PV panels can be 25 years or more. Inverters and batteries are generally 10 years. So a little bit more about the batteries. So there's the nickel, cobalt, magnesium, NCA, lithium titanate, and lithium iron phosphate batteries. And then there's something called flow batteries, which I'll only mention because it's in research now. And the real advantage of flow batteries, not only are they not flammable, but they also can last 6 to 8 hours. So that may be something coming on the horizon. It's not quite there yet. So lithium iron phosphate, as I said, these are the ones that we really like. They last 10 plus years. They can have 3,000 to 6,000 cycle life, which is a long time. Their round trip efficiency is generally above 95%. The temperature range is broad, and they have very little maintenance. You monitor them, and your installer monitors them via the internet or the Wi-Fi. They can handle surges, so power tools, well pumps, even refrigerators. They do not off gas, and they do have many brands of very reliable batteries. These are the NMC batteries found in cars, power tools, and bikes. The Tesla and LG Chem are well known. They have similar round trip efficiencies, but their cycle life generally is about 2,500. So they will last 10 years, but not much past that. They have some risk of thermal runaway, meaning they can turn into fire, and they sometimes may need cooling, for instance, Tesla. NCA is also found in some Tesla cars and in stationary battery storage, slightly lower efficiency, 3,000 to 5,000 cycle life, definitely needs cooling, temperature range is not as good, and they are scalable to a point. So these are the things we think are important: resiliency, arbitrage, and hedging. Resiliency includes energy security, preparing for PSPS events, and other kinds of problems with the grid power, where you have an automatic transfer switch that transfers in milliseconds. Arbitrage, you can use the power yourself, and reduce your utility bills, and as a hedge against future rate increases. More reasons include if you use the sun and the battery to provide power, then you actually can self-consume and building electrify without increasing your power use off the grid, which means more transformers and more system-wide costs. So this actually protects the grid and in some ways will be useful with DR, demand response, and virtual power plants in the future. You reduce your greenhouse gases, you can prepare for bidirectional power now. So a lot of these things are not yet in the market, but will be in a few years. And if you get an EV that can do bidirectional power, you're pretty much set. So a 60 kilowatt hour vehicle battery, like in the Tesla 3 or the Bolt, will power a typical house by itself for 5 days. You also potentially can get credit or money on your bill, and there's a federal tax credit. So that's the end of this part, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Woo! Fantastic. Jean, one of the questions that came in, since you are obviously ambitious, you've got batteries and EV chargers and solar going in. Some people have been asking you about, like, is there a reason why you haven't expanded into heat pump water heaters or an HVAC systems?
Well, I'm personally not doing the installation, and so we're working with electricians. So we're not really working with HVAC people. That's something to consider in the future. I would love to work with somebody who wants to do all of it, right? The electrification, right? And the electrical upgrades if needed, and also figuring out how not to upgrade so that we don't, you know, impress the PG&E people with the need to increase our transformers and more costs. And then self-supply. So especially, I'm thinking that if we have a lot of these kinds of outages, more and more people will be inconvenienced, and it's extremely dangerous for people with medical conditions that have equipment that absolutely has to be on 24/7. So it is another form of health security for people who are in that situation. And we should be able to get more and more people into it. The problem right now is financing. And I'm hoping that if we get a public bank, which they're somehow doing in San Francisco and Oakland, that there will be more in the way of solar loans and the ability to do more efficient and quick financing, because people need these things and they need them now. Actually, they need them before last year. So we're really, really glad that there are a lot of installers, and we really hope that this becomes more popular as people understand that even though the price tag looks high, in the end, it saves you money.
Another question. Nick Peterson wants to know if EV chargers should or should not be placed on your home battery, a home system battery.
You know, I don't know if that's a should or should not. I think it depends on how much power you're going to need for your car. If we have actually 3 electric type vehicles, 2 of them are hybrid, and one, the Prius, only has a 10-mile range. It has a very small battery, so you can charge it off your 110 in 3 hours, right? But it's not going to get you very far on electric alone, which is why it's a hybrid. The others can take up to 8 hours, depending on how much you deplete it. But most people who use electrics don't deplete it every day. So the typical range that most people drive in a typical day is about 30 miles. So you can actually recharge those cars really quickly on a 240. Once you get to needing a rapid charge, that's a much bigger issue. But on a 240 line, you should be able to charge a typical electric vehicle overnight without any difficulty.
Excellent. Michael Kurokawa wants to know about his Bolt and just generally bidirectional capability. Tom Cavett similarly wanted to know if you think that people should skip wall batteries and just start working on vehicle to home.
Well, there are companies that are developing the equipment to do that, and it has to go through UL. Otherwise, I can't recommend, you know, that you install this. We have talked to many people who figured out how to do it on their own. And if somebody wants to email me, I can give you more information, but we can't recommend it because we don't know what kinds of qualifications homeowners have in order to be able to do this. So
And Wallbox is coming out with one. Asiaco's coming out with one.
Asiaco has one.
Right?
Right. And Itron is coming out with one. There are people who are working on how to work with Teslas because they have really big batteries. They would be an excellent source, but Tesla is not making it easy for them. So, but it is possible to do it now. It's just that if you are going to do it, we can't recommend it if it isn't actually UL certified.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul Wormer asked, please comment on batteries when solar capacity is small compared to the demand. And the examples he gives, like small lot, multi-unit, multi-story buildings. That's the small solar capacity, but high demand.
You know, number one is you should definitely consider the bidirectional panels, the bifacial panels, because they do get 10 to 20% more power. So you get more out of a smaller space.
Yep.
Right? And you should consider if you've got trees that are blocking, please do cut back those trees. We are in a good situation, actually, in terms of climate change, because it does appear that we're getting more sun. We actually had an 80-degree day here in mid-January. And
Here
that,
being, where are you?
in the Bay Area,
that
never happened before. Never. And we've had long periods with no rain. We're in a sort of a drought pattern right now, 5 days, 10 days with no rain in the middle of the rainy season. So that means you're going to make more power, even if you have small panels. But if you actually want more panels, then you really need to think about the direction that you put those panels in. So you're better off on the south and west than you are on the north and east.
Well, with that, would you mind going over to the chat and trying to address some of the remaining questions?
Yeah. So
Alice,
I have to unshare, right, at this point?
yes, if you stop sharing.
Good.
And
Okay.
Alice Sung wants to get in touch with you, just so you know. She thinks you had a great presentation, which you did. Woo woo! Way to go! Great job.
I wanted it to be something that you could actually access in your own mind, how you would figure out how to do this.
That was super practical.
Right.
Nice. I mean, just walk us through like what almost all of us who have homes would want to know. That was great.
Right.
Thank you.
Like most people are like, where do I start? Right. So thank you.
Knowledgeable person, Jean. Thank you.
I'll go to chat. So, okay, let me get there.